today. The topic of this webinar is New York City's policy target and roadmap for resilient solar+storage. This webinar is a presentation of Clean Energy Group's Resilient Power Project, and we have with us today 3 excellent guest speakers, as well as our host for this webinar, Sept. Sept is a project director here at Clean Energy Group. Before I pass it over to them, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our participants for this webinar are in listen-only mode. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of this webinar. You can call in using a telephone, or you can connect using your computer mic and speakers. A very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions as you think of them throughout the webinar by typing them into the question box on your webinar console and hitting send. We will be reading through your questions as they come in, and we're going to save some time at the end of our presentations to address questions from the audience. So to make sure that we get to your question, type it in early when you think of it. Don't wait until the very end. A final note, this webinar is being recorded. You will find a recording of this webinar, as well as all of our previous Resilient Power Project webinars, on our website at resilient-power.org. So with that, I will pass it over to our host for this webinar, Sept.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm just going to give a brief introduction about who we are and about the Resilient Power Project, and then introduce our speakers for today. So it's going to be a great webinar. We're Clean Energy Group. Clean Energy Group is a national nonprofit that's been around for about 20 years, working across the clean energy sector in areas of finance, innovation, technology, and policy. We also have a sister organization called the Clean Energy States Alliance, which is a membership organization of state managers of clean energy state programs. So these are a lot of energy offices, state energy offices. The Resilient Power Project itself is a foundation-funded project that's in collaboration with the Meridian Institute. A number of our funders are listed here. And just to give you a little bit of background about what the Resilient Power Project is, it's going into its 4th year now, and really, Resilient Power Project started after, in the wake of things like Superstorm Sandy, when we found that existing backup generation was unreliable, inconsistent, and not to mention dirty as well. So we were looking for a cleaner, more reliable alternative to traditional sources of backup generation. At that time, the price of storage was really coming down. Solar was already fairly widespread. So we looked at the combination mainly of solar and storage technologies to provide reliable backup power, as well as provide services throughout the year. Since we started the project, really, our definition of resiliency is expanded to include lowering energy burdens as well. The focus of the project is on low-income communities. There's really 2 areas within that. One is affordable housing. The other is critical community facilities like shelters, healthcare facilities, and first responders. We do a lot of getting information out about resilient power and about the technologies through webinars like this and reports that are available on our website. There's some of the reports covers there below, as well as blogs. And we also work with people at all levels, from federal down to the local level, trying to get policies in place that encourage power solutions to increase access in low-income communities. And we help directly support projects themselves. So we have a small technical assistance grant program to help projects get past the pre-development phase and get projects actually funded and going. We've been doing this for quite a while now. We're involved in projects all across the country. If you want to learn more about the project, I encourage you to check out our website, which has a lot of information about Resilient Power Project and what we've been up to. And we're actually going to have a webinar about the Resilient Power Project and more information on that in a couple of days on Thursday. This is a screenshot of our website. So there's a lot more information in there, a lot of information about the projects we're involved in and projects other people are involved in across the country. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers for today that are going to tell you about what's going on in New York City with solar and storage. So first up, we're going to have Laurie Reilly, who is Communications Director for the City University of New York Sustainable CUNY. She directs communications New York program for CUNY. And she's the author of multiple sustainable documents and grants, and is responsible for coordinating and implementing internal and external sustainability communications across CUNY's academic institutions. Since 2006, under the direction of Tria Case, Ms. Reilly has played a critical role in implementing multiple federal, state, and city grants designed to address the balance of systems costs for installing solar, including the U.S. Department of Energy New York City Solar America City Partnership, the Sunshot Rooftop Challenge 1-2 programs, and projects under the New York Sun Initiative. In addition, Ms. Reilly directs communications for the Sustainability Division for CUNY Ventures Incorporated, and works with Ms. Case to form the Smart Distributed Generation Hub. She has spent 18 years as a broadcast journalist previously, and won 5 New York State Broadcasters Awards as a writer, producer, and anchor for providing in-depth coverage on science, technology, health, and politics on both television and the radio. Next up, after that, we'll have Kathryn Wright, who is a senior consultant with Meister Consulting Group. Kathryn works with clients and projects which sit at the intersection of climate adaptation and mitigation. She currently leads Meister Consulting Group's work on the solar, which aims to increase the energy resilience of New York City through increased solar and storage deployment in partnership with CUNY and the National. Wright is a member of the technical assistance team for the Clean Energy Solutions Center's International Ask an Expert program and the U.S. Department of Energy Soul Smart program. She also serves on the steering committee of the National Adaptation Forum. Lastly, we have Ben Mandel, who is Renewable Energy Policy Advisor for the Mayor's Office of Sustainability for New York City. And as the Renewable Energy Policy Advisor, Ben works to expand the penetration of distributed clean energy resources throughout New York City. In particular, he promotes policies and programs that make cleaner energy and transportation modes accessible to more of New York's residents, with particular focus on distributed solar energy and electric vehicles. Ben represents the Mayor's Office in the New York City Solar Partnership, which runs the Solarize New York City program for limited time group purchasing campaigns of solar photovoltaic technology. Prior to joining City of New York, he was a energy law and policy fellow at NYU School of Law, and Ben holds a master's degree in public policy and energy and resources from UC Berkeley and a bachelor's degree from Brown University. So with that, I'd like to kick off the webinar, turn things over to Laurie.
Thank you very much, Seth, and thank you to the Clean Energy Group for hosting this webinar and collaborating with us on helping to educate the public and the decision makers. If you're wondering how a university became so involved with solar and solar+storage, we've been that trusted objective third party for over a dozen years now, helping to remove the barriers to solar and now solar+storage in New York City. So we're able to, and New York State, so we're able to provide that platform. And these are some of the focus areas that we have worked on for a dozen years under Tria Case. One of the big technology pushes out there that we were proud to launch last June was the New York State Solar Map and Portal, where you can find all of our information, and it's been a great educational tool as well as letting the public know how much solar they can get on their rooftop or in their field, and all the steps they need to take to get there. So we've been serving as this platform, and as such, we're able to help bridge the administration turnovers that naturally happen on a local level, on a city level, on a state level, on a federal level, and bringing to fruition a lot of policies and projects. So that's the role we've been serving for quite some time. And our challenge with storage was to build and stabilize the sector in these administrational changeover, and making sure that we can help carve a pathway to solar+storage. When I talk to reporters sometimes, and they're all excited about batteries and the latest news from Elon Musk, I remind them you can't just take a battery and throw it into the marketplace. The Department of Buildings need to know how to inspect it, and what is safe is primarily on the minds of the Fire Department of New York. So these are some of the things that we knew that we had to try to help figure out for the marketplace. And this was our big trigger was Hurricane Sandy. It's kind of a frightening snapshot there of what happened to New York City. And this, of course, next picture here was pretty famous in the New York Times of Manhattan going dark. And of course, when Manhattan and Wall Street is affected, it really has an effect on the entire economy, not only in the United States, but across around the world. And we got a lot of calls in 2012 from reporters wondering how did the solar installations do on the rooftops in New York City during a hurricane, and they all did just fine, thank you. However, if your inverter was in the basement, yes, from the surge of seawater, that did get damaged like anything else in people's basement. But it quickly became apparent that, you know, in all the sunny days that followed, when there were still power outages, the solar that was installed at that time could not help provide much needed power. So we pulled together the first Smart DG Hub meeting, and we looked at the 4 key areas that would need to be unlocked for storage to be able to come into the marketplace of New York City: hardware, policy and legal, software, economics, and finance. So CUNY, Sustainable CUNY, formed the Smart Distributed Generation Hub. And then we teamed up with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and Meister Consultants Group on putting proposals to the Department of Energy and the state of New York, and we got their support to start creating that pathway to the marketplace for Solar+Storage. And with the help of a lot of partners, we have collaborated in making a lot of headway that we'll be talking about in detail here today. So one of the first things that we did in these working groups is we started to outline the process for how would you add storage now. What is the current process in New York City? So all of the working groups and dozens of key stakeholders in these working groups, agencies, every hand that touches the permitting process or the inspection process has been part of our working group to come up with what is today's process. What is it that we can do? And all of these can be found on our New York Solar Mapping portal in our resource section and also in the Solar+Storage section. So installers and building owners that want to know, how do I add storage to what I already have? Or if I'm thinking about it, how do I make that work in New York City's current environment? And this is in parallel to our work to create the roadmap. And here's an example of our process guide for permitting and interconnection for the VRLA batteries. So it's actually step-by-step process of what needs to be done and what the timeline is. And so this has been an enormous help to the installers in New York City, and not just in New York City, but in New York State and across the country. They're using these as a guideline for trying to figure out their own process in their own jurisdiction. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kathryn Wright, our partner and over at Meister Consultants Group. We're very proud to be releasing, to have just released the roadmap to resilient solar in New York.
Hi, thanks, Laurie. As she, Meister Consultants Group is one of the partners in the DG Hub project, and as Laurie alluded to, there are quite a few different stakeholders that were working with us throughout. So I think an important thing to know about the DG Hub process and our process for developing this roadmap is the DG Hub is organized into those same working groups and thematic areas that were highlighted earlier, thinking through challenges related to policy, economics and finance, hardware, and software. And the working groups themselves are made up of individuals in the solar industry, the storage industry, nonprofits, city agencies, as well as other technical experts. And these folks were the ones that worked together and really talked to us about the challenges that we were seeing in the market. So in developing the roadmap, it was very clear that there was a need and interest in resilient solar and resilient technologies, especially after Sandy. And there was a gap in that many solar systems that were installed in New York City were not able to island and operate independently. And so we saw this as an opportunity to really understand what some of the barriers and challenges have been to getting solar and battery storage deployed. If everyone agrees that this is important and we're really not seeing a large market uptake, there must be a lot of different challenges that are simply not making the business case clear to the larger market. And so the roadmap as it, which I'll walk through in a little bit more detail, was developed as part of those interviews and focus group conversations. We also did extensive market research surveys of the solar and storage industry in New York State to kind of get a status on what the costs were and what they viewed the challenges as being. And then we also had a number of roundtables that really brought industry and the city together. And another thing that I think is unique about the roadmap and the DG Hub process is based on the results of those conversations and surveys, we were able to respond and develop materials that could at least in the interim bridge that gap, like the permitting guide, and also some guidance around solarized programs that were interested in integrating storage into community group purchase processes. So in the slide that we see here, essentially when we're presenting this infographic and some of the key messages from the roadmap is that essentially for resilient solar and storage to take off in New York, there are essentially 4 key areas that are essentially holding things back. There's been a lot of policy changes and fluctuations and really no structured sustainable program for storage across the state, and so policy clarity can help. Resilient solar, and I'll get to this in a minute, can provide a number of different benefits to the grid. It's not necessarily compensated for all of these benefits, which also is a barrier that we have to work to address. And there's also the opportunity for additional incentives to really incentivize that resilience value, and also an important role of education and outreach in improving market adoption. Let me just go back. What we mean when we say resilient solar is we're thinking about solar systems that can provide services during normal operating conditions, and then it can provide some of the benefits that we're all quite aware of that solar can provide, such as energy savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions, but we're also really interested in the implications of battery energy storage because they can provide backup power to critical infrastructure facilities, provide deeper savings to commercial facilities with demand charge management, and also just deliver needed support to the grid. And so another reason that this was particularly interesting and timely is that in New York City, Con Edison released the Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program that was looking at non-wires alternatives to a transmission upgrade, and this really increased the interest in battery systems in New York City. But we found those same policy barriers were still in place, so it was a really important context for us to begin our work. So as I mentioned, we have essentially the 4 main pillars of the the DG Hub, and the roadmap as a resource is structured in the same way. So we tried to build it as a modular document so that anyone interested in it could provide resources in any of these, could find resources in any of these 4 categories. And not necessarily have to work through the whole document. So related to the hardware section of the roadmap, all of which is available on CUNY's New York Solar Map website, we really focused on describing what some of the core components of resilient solar, talking about different options for whether it's AC versus DC coupling, and implications for systems that might want to be retrofitted. And then we really focused on case studies, and in particular the results of some analysis that the DG Hub undertook in looking at the financial feasibility of different types of solar and storage systems, be it solar and storage or solar and storage paired with existing generation. And the reason these case studies were interesting was that we tried to look at these different hardware scenarios for existing critical infrastructure sites in New York City. Our findings were quite interesting in that we really found that the resilience value of having these critical infrastructure facilities online was critical to quantify because it often made a big difference in terms of the system's payback, and it also was very important to those facilities to be online, so it certainly was a value for them. That's an example of what you can find in the hardware section of the roadmap. We also have had a number of different conversations around policy. So within New York, there's the New York REV process, which will have implications for future tariffs for distributed generation. But as I mentioned, there's also very interesting work that's gone on with Con Edison's support of battery energy storage through its Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program, but also local barriers as well. So we've been working very diligently with the Department of Buildings and the Fire Department of New York on thinking through permitting processes for different types of battery chemistries. This is work that is certainly ongoing, and we expect as part of the next steps of the roadmap to be able to come up with more processes like the ones that we outlined for advanced lead-acid batteries for some of the other chemistries that are increasing in the market, like lithium-ion and flow batteries. On the software side in the roadmap, we do kind of outline and provide resources on the types of different software and communications protocols that a system might need based on the different types of value streams that might be used or accessed by the storage system. And one thing we found with software that's particularly challenging for retrofits is that there's simply not plug-and-play standards yet, which creates a lot of interoperability as the battery energy storage system that might be cost-effective on paper, but are trying to pair it with a solar system from a different manufacturer. Often we've found is the case, and often highlighted in a case study from Hartley Nature Center, that it's actually quite challenging to try and get the solar and storage pieces of a system to communicate with each other and be responsive. So this is certainly an area that still needs investigation and support that we're also and then lastly on the economics we do have some examples of the result of the market research survey I mentioned before in terms of cost surveys of the market, and we've also kind of highlight some of the other existing programs for incentives for storage in California and Germany. And so our hope here, especially on the economic side, is that by thinking through future incentives or tariffs that might be available in New York and pairing that with a serious discussion about how to value resiliency, that we can see advancements here. So again, the roadmap itself is available on the New York Solar Map, and I'll just talk a little bit about how it's structured. So as I mentioned, it's kind of grouped into those 4 different sections, and then for each topic area, we've based on our market research, identified key barriers, and then also some potential solutions to those barriers. So in hardware, through the market research we did, there was very limited overlap between solar system installers and storage installers. Most solar installers said they had not yet installed a battery energy system yet, and most of the storage providers that we interviewed said they had not yet installed a solar system yet. So one thing that could be helpful is installation best practices and making those more readily available throughout the New York market, as some counties in California have already taken action to do. On the software side, as I alluded to, there have been interoperability challenges. That's been something that's identified as a barrier. And in the roadmap, we outline a number of different industry groups that are moving towards creating communication standards. And as the DG Hub, we will continue to distribute those to the wider market as they become available. On the economic side, a barrier that I've mentioned our group identified was value resiliency. And so as part of our feasibility assessments, we came up with a rough methodology for trying to incorporate the value of resiliency into the feasibility assessments. But one thing that we're really looking to do this year is try and take that a step further and come up with methodologies and also kind of develop a conversation with some of the neighboring industries like insurance that really need to be brought on board in order to make sure that this is actually reflected as a market value. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the permitting process is a barrier that's been identified by industry, and in the roadmap we outline a number of different solutions or pathways towards alleviating this barrier, including encouraging a little bit more consistency in permitting requirements around the state. So that's just a little bit about the roadmap, what's available, and how it's structured. We do recognize that the storage market and the policy environment in New York State is something that is changing rapidly. So what we are working towards releasing by the end of the month is essentially an implementation tracker where you could take any of those 4 high-level themes I described and locate, locate a specific barrier, and we'll give you sort of a status update on what the status of the policy is, and what types of projects are being implemented now and who is implementing them. So we recognize this as a need given how quickly this market is moving, and we're working very hard to make that available to the wider market so that these lessons learned can be applied outside of New York City, throughout New York State, and in other jurisdictions across the country. So I will quickly pass the mic back to Laurie, who can just give you a little bit more detail about how to find some of these resources online. We do have quite a...
Thank you very much, Kathryn. Really appreciate that. And I'm just waiting for the controls to be passed over back to me. As I mentioned earlier, we launched the New York Solar Map and Portal in June of 2000. Actually, just this past June, and it's built upon our original map of the New York City Solar Map. So it's meant to be a one-stop place where you can find everything you want to know about solar in the state of New York and in the city of New York, and find all of these resources that Kathryn and I were talking about there on the map. And then in addition, our project is also we added a layer onto the map for the installed energy storage systems, not just ones that are paired with solar, but other kinds of energy storage systems as well. So we're just starting to build those out on the map so we will know where those are. And then also, as part of the New York Solar Map and Portal is a calculator that is been one of our more popular features, where you can find out exactly how much it costs to install solar and what the incentives are, and also then link from there to different installers. It's a very robust and flexible calculator. You can change the, what you pay, your cost that you pay for electricity and how big or small the installation is and so forth. And what we're doing now is that we are in the process of integrating resilient capabilities, storage capabilities into this calculator. So that we're pretty excited about that. It'll add a lot of functionality, whether or not you want to add in enough storage that's going to be able to allow you to power your critical load when the grid is down. So there's that component of it. So there's 2 separate analysis tools. So the off-grid component is one, and you can also pick, the size of your load and how long you want, how you think the outage duration will be, and that will change your analysis on sizing and on cost and so forth. And then the other way that you can use this analysis tool is for the people that want to put commercial solar+storage on commercial buildings. And of course, there's a lot more capabilities of storage than just resiliency and off-grid. There's all the peak shifting and load shaving and all of that. So that helps really get in the details of breaking down your electricity bill and your demand versus energy charges and so on and so forth. So we're hoping to have that launched by the 3rd quarter this year. We have an Excel version of it now, and we're pretty excited about that particular capability, and we've been working with NREL and some other partners under the Department of Energy on that as well. And with that, I will turn that back over to our administrator so we can hear from Ben.
Thanks, Laurie, and we will pass it over to Ben Mandel right now.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, Seth, for the opportunity to share New York City's vision for energy storage and to specifically share a bit about how energy storage, in our view, fits into the 80 by 50 vision that we have as a city, having joined a number of large leading cities internationally on climate in committing to an 80% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. My name is Ben Mandel. I am a renewable energy policy advisor here in the New York City Mayor's Office of Sustainability, where this 80 by 50 charge is one of our main responsibilities. Also out of our office, we administer policies and programs aimed at achieving the best air quality of any large U.S. city by 2030, as well as sending zero waste to landfill by 2030. That's called our zero waste target. But today I'm going to talk about 80 by 50 and, as I mentioned, how energy storage fits in and why we're really excited that New York City gets to be kind of the target of the efforts of the Smart DG Hub and all that was just presented on that. So I mentioned a few of the sustainability targets that are a component of our broader city objectives, and that's laid out in One New York, which was initially released by Mayor de Blasio in April of 2015, so coming up on 2 years ago. And each April at Earth Day, so this year it'll be just in a few weeks, we come out with an annual update. And we keep the structure the same, and I think it does a really nice job of encapsulating our approach to programs and policies and indicating the priorities that we move forward as a city. So the first kind of a lens for our operations is to ensure that we have a growing, thriving city. The second is to make sure that we have an inclusive, equitable economy so that the benefits of a growing, thriving economy accrue equally. The third is the sustainability lens that I've mentioned, and that's where we predominantly focus. And the fourth is resiliency. So while we do focus on the third lens of One NYC, I suppose I just want to mention that, you know, our work is very cross-cutting, and these are the priorities that inform what we do. So to take the next steps on articulating what we're going for and to trace out steps necessary to make 80 by 50 a reality, we put out a roadmap of our own, New York City's Roadmap to 80 by 50, this past September in 2016, right around Climate Week. And for the first time, we really formalized an analysis that was economy-wide, whereas traditionally, the Office of Sustainability here has focused on the building sector and energy efficiency, since buildings do account for about 70% of our greenhouse gas emissions footprint. But we know that in order to hit 80 by 50, we need contributions across the board. So we expanded our analysis into sectors like energy supply, transportation, and waste, as well as the building sector, to do modeling on technologies and policies that would be required to achieve that level of reduction. So we're currently at about, I believe, 15% reduction from a 2005 baseline, and we are tracking toward hitting an interim target of a 40% reduction by 2030. But what we've seen is that we have a lot more work to do if we're to get to 80 by 50, particularly under a business as usual approach. What we saw here in this analysis is that we have the technologies and tools at our disposal today to get there. It's just going to be more of a societal, institutional, and regulatory, and of course financial challenge to put those pieces in place in a way that adds up to an 80% reduction by 2050. And so I want to share a bit of the outcomes of our analysis, particularly relating to energy supply, to illuminate some of the use cases that we uncovered around energy storage. So what you see here is the grid mix. supplying New York City projected out to 2050 under a business as usual circumstance. And what that means is essentially we assume that only external factors play out. The city itself does not take any direct intervention in our energy supply, which we could do through something like new bilateral contracts for large-scale renewables as one example. So in the absence of that, what we modeled is a big decrease in nuclear capacity after 2030. At the time of this analysis, we assumed that Indian Point, the two generators there, would continue to supply lots of baseload energy to the city until its stated retirement date in the early and mid-2030s. So that's why you see that drop off in the kind of magenta color. And based on our baseline assumptions for replacement costs, we saw that probably a lot of that capacity is going to be filled by natural gas, which is the bottom color, the dark blue. But what encouraged us is that even under BAU, it seems like the wholesale or bulk system is likely to see a lot more solar penetration and a fair amount of wind as we go through time, particularly after the mid-2030s. Our projections showed that solar PV costs for utility scale only, this is not distributed PV, this is just utility scale stuff, upstate or on Long Island, would really, the prices would fall quite a bit and allow for much more solar penetration. And there are also a few other scenarios that we ran to kind of test the sensitivity of the carbon intensity of New York City's energy supply to changes in outside circumstances. So when input parameters were stacked up a certain way that would kind of help us get toward 80 by 50, we called that the low carbon intensity grid scenario, and that was things like extra transmission capacity from upstate to down, quicker decline in capital costs for utility scale renewable resources, higher natural gas prices so that over time, as existing fossil resources are retired, they would be more likely to be replaced by renewable resources than new fossil resources. And the inverse goes for the high carbon intensity grid scenario, where we assumed lots of demand statewide, which would be taxing on the grid, and not much new transmission between regions to bring upstate renewables downstate and so forth. And so what we saw is that we can get from anywhere from about 1/5 of our energy supply being renewable to up to 3/4. And as a kind of preview of the main conclusion, we saw that the low carbon intensity grid is really what we need to count on and to advocate for at the state level in order to hit our 80 by 50 objectives, for reasons that I'll get into in a moment. But what this illustrates is that more than likely we're going to need to rely increasingly on renewable but very intermittent supply resources. And so what that means is we're going to need a lot more resources both in city and outside the city to accommodate those resources more flexibly. So energy storage has a very compelling use case there, whether in terms of utility scale resources or within the city to allow us and the Con Ed distribution system and in-city transmission systems to more quickly react to fluctuations in energy supply from increasingly renewable resources. And I mentioned that this is going to be important, especially because other sectors are going to become increasingly reliant on the electricity grid for their energy. So whether it's vehicles that today burn fossil fuels on site, or buildings that burn fuel oil or natural gas on site to provide heating needs, we're going to start to see a lot more of a push to electrify these loads, which could have pronounced consequences on the amount of bulk demand coming from New York City. So we also wanted to see kind of what would be the effect of relatively moderate changes in New York City demand demand on the carbon emissions coefficient of our electricity supply. And that's what this chart demonstrates. It shows under the business as usual, high carbon intensity and low carbon intensity scenarios, what's the range of plausible carbon coefficients if you toggle or modulate the New York City electricity demand. And so fortunately, what we saw there is that changes in in-city demand aren't too much of a driver of the carbon content of our grid, which is reassuring. But looking more holistically across sectors, we did uncover really a number of potential use cases that we found compelling for energy storage. So in addition to kind of the enhanced grid flexibility and stability functions that I already outlined as we get to, an up to 70% and beyond renewable bulk grid, it's also important to recognize that as the city and state become increasingly renewable, energy storage will be a useful mechanism to ensure that those resources don't get curtailed. So effectively keeping the capacity factor as rated and not needing to worry about curtailing those assets and making sure they're as cost effective and deliver return on investment that, that building owners and project finance would expect. We're also seeing energy storage increasingly deployed as a non-wires alternative to traditional utility investments in things like substation upgrades. I know Kathryn mentioned the Con Edison Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program, and there is a sizable energy storage emphasis as a component of that program, which the city is very supportive of in terms of utilizing more distributed energy storage as a way to avoid needing to put in potentially billions of dollars in traditional infrastructure upgrades. On the buildings level, we understand that various forms of energy storage, whether electrochemical, meaning battery storage, or thermal energy storage systems, can be used to enhance demand management capabilities. And that's a critical tool because, as I mentioned before, hitting 80 by 50 will be challenging financially for no other reason. And so offering tools to allow building owners to, for instance, participate in demand response and earn extra revenue as a result of that will be very helpful toward our cause. Energy storage can also a little more obviously provide resiliency benefits for critical loads in buildings and for critical facilities like nursing homes, hospitals, various forms of cooling centers, and so on. And the benefits also extend to transportation, which I think is a little less intuitive to people. But it's important to recognize that as utilities are figuring out kind of the opportunity around energy storage, they're also trying to figure out what their role is with respect to electric vehicles. And especially in cases like we see frequently in New York, where residents don't necessarily have access to predictable off-street parking locations where they can put a slower level 2 charger, we're going to need to rely on a system that's more akin to a gas station model, where we have more centralized fast charging infrastructure that can draw down currently 25 to 50 kilowatts in just a single unit. And ideally, you'd want to build in redundancy so that you don't have people queuing up at a single charger. So you could be talking about really high levels of demand instantaneously at particular sites, and that means that Con Edison and other utilities statewide are really going to have to contend with the grid impacts that electric vehicles could introduce. On a site host perspective, what that could mean is that you start to bump site hosts into demand bill tariffs, and that demand charges can start to become a very relevant barrier to adoption, particularly when utilization rates for electric vehicles remain low, and site hosts might be slapped with a pretty high demand charge for as few as 1 charges per month, and can't recoup that cost based on revenue if they're not getting a lot of usage out of those chargers. So here we see an opportunity to deploy energy storage systems in tandem with electric vehicle charging infrastructure, particularly fast charging infrastructure, to both mitigate grid impacts associated with clustered fast charging and to ease bill impacts that can come from high demand charges. Oh, sorry, I went a little too far. So out of interest in these cross-cutting use cases across sectors, we wanted to demonstrate support for the energy storage market for the various things that it can do for us as a city in pursuit of our sustainability goals. So back in September, when this roadmap to 80 by 50 came out, we announced the city's first ever energy storage deployment target, which was for 100 megawatt hours of energy storage by 2020. And this was also the nation's first citywide energy storage target. So there's definitely been leadership at the state level in, for instance, California and Massachusetts. But we were the first city to come forward and establish a target. And what we intended with this is really to step behind the sector and demonstrate our support. We know that there's certainly a lot of work to be done in terms of hammering out the regulatory and oversight processes. And we feel that setting out a bold vision for energy storage motivated by some of these use cases has been helpful already in terms of mobilizing city resources to go where they need to in order for us to meet this goal. So a very concrete example of that is the FDNY Sustainability Unit, which is already, it has positions posted for engineers and a project manager with the stated goal of more systematically understanding and reviewing new and emerging sustainability technologies that are not covered by the fire code and that we need to really wrap our arms around a little more holistically as a city to better understand what the true risks are and what mitigation measures can be brought to bear on them so that we can get them deployed. I want to mention that, you know, our energy storage target was informed through stakeholder consultation and close coordination with CUNY's DG Hub effort. We worked very closely with Con Ed and exchanged quite a bit of notes in terms of their pipeline of energy storage projects from various portfolios, whether related to the Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Program or not. There's also the Virtual Power Plant Program, which is a demonstration program that they have proposed that's got more distributed solar plus storage on residential properties throughout New York City, and we certainly support that. So a lot of our 100 megawatts in terms of the target we set came from visibility into projects that Con Edison is accounting for and planning for, as well as on the city's own properties. Our Department of Citywide Administrative Services has its IDEA program, which stands for the Innovative Demonstrations in Energy Adaptability Program. And as part of that, we are deploying energy storage on a number of public facilities in the city. There's also a program administered by the New York City Economic Development Corporation aimed at reinforcing small businesses to continue operations through natural disasters called RISE NYC. And one of the portfolios of solutions being deployed there is energy storage. And as mentioned, we coordinated closely with CUNY. We also coordinated with Meister on this effort, and we'll be tracking progress and making sure that as much as we can, we're stepping behind this new commitment. So we are, the mayor's office is working as part of the new NYCERDA funded effort that CUNY is leading along with DNVGL and New York Best and CADMIS Group to really target soft costs of energy storage with New York City as a focus, but of course statewide applicability. And we're really hoping for positive returns in the not too distant future. So in terms of next steps and where we go from here, I think the most critical next step will be to staff up. I had mentioned on the previous slide that we were able to allocate additional city resources to the fire department to support their efforts to learn what they need to know to answer their questions and curiosities and concerns about various types of energy storage chemistries. And so it's at this point partially a matter of getting them the staff that they need to be able to do that testing or specify what they would need to see from tests conducted by partner organizations, as well as devote the necessary resources to doing codes work so that eventually we can progress to a stage where approvals and oversight of energy storage applications are not one-off and case by case, but rather more systematized. We also need to gain experience. So fortunately, a microgrid proposal for the Marcus Garvey houses in Brownsville, Brooklyn has been moving forward, and a lithium-ion system has now been delivered there and is about to be commissioned. You see an image of that on the bottom of this slide. So we need to just gain more real-world experience and understand how systems perform in the field in New York City, and that that can be a foundation for scaling up. And then we'll also want to continue coordination with our utility here, Con Edison, as well as state entities at NYCERDA and the Department of Public Service to make sure that as a city and as a state, we're creating the right kinds of environments and sending the right incentives to the energy storage sector to show that there's a lot of value here that can be captured through deployment of energy storage systems. I think one concrete example I can give there is the state's value of DER proceeding, DER being distributed energy resources, where New York City is advocating for as many factors to be included in what's called the value stack as possible, so that, for instance, we can get the external value of resiliency included in compensation for distributed energy resources as appropriate. So that, for instance, if an energy storage system were linked to solar PV, the net exports from that system could be reflective of the benefits that those resources are providing for broader community and citywide resiliency. And so those are conversations that haven't quite made it into the interim tariff that's just been released a little under a month ago, but the city is active in conversations with the state on this proceeding, and we're definitely optimistic that productive conversations can be had beginning this summer and through the end of 2018 as the state takes up a more permanent successor tariff to net metering. So I think that's about all I've got on energy storage, but I want to thank everyone for their attention this afternoon and look forward to any questions.
Great. Thank you, Ben, and thank you to Laurie and Kathryn as well. So we've got a bit of time left here for questions. So, we may not get to all the questions. Anything we don't get to, I urge you to either reach out to our speakers today or reach out to us at Clean Energy Group, and we can direct your question to the person that makes sense to have answer it. So early on, we had a question. There was a mention of a process for installing lead-acid batteries in these systems. And Ben, you touched on this later on, but there's a question about what's the process right now for installing lithium-ion batteries in New York City?
This is Ben. I'm happy to take the first crack at that, and Kathryn and Laurie can definitely add in on anything I miss. Essentially, what I was trying to convey is that right now where we are is lithium-ion and battery applications in general are still not covered under the fire and building codes. And so anything relating to battery storage is subject to extensive review by both the Department of Buildings and the Fire Department. And that means that as part of the Department of Buildings Office of Technical Certification and Research, OTCR, they need a letter of no objection from the Fire Department, and they need to be sure that it passes a number of other code measures that are enforced by the Department of Buildings. So right now, it's pretty early days with respect to lithium-ion deployments in the city. The one I just showed was, one of our first applications of lithium-ion that's been permitted. So, there's certainly precedent, but right now, it seems that measures to mitigate risk as much as possible, including fire suppression, including outdoor siting, factors those with robust protocols in place for communications and emergency preparedness plan, those will be looked favorably upon. I think eager to figure out how to deploy these systems at a larger scale, but to do so safely. And so, I'm confident we can get to a point where once we've got more systems in place, we'll have learned a good deal, and through a lot of the work that CUNY and Meister and soon the NYCERDA-funded work will uncover, we'll get to a more streamlined process, and that's certainly the vision. But right now, it's still being handled in a pretty case-by-case manner.
And this is Laurie Reilly. I will add here. Hi, this is Laurie Reilly. I will add that CUNY has been working with the Fire Department of New York for a dozen years. So they have been at the table on trying to come up with the pathway for permitting in solar and now Solar+Storage. And in fact, now we are having weekly meetings with the mayor's office and CUNY, and we have outlined the different buckets of issues that need to be addressed, from cascading protections to ventilation to battery disposal. So what I'm saying is that there is a platform, and this is being systematically addressed with the various kinds of batteries, and there's also other projects under NYCERDA of testing other kinds of batteries, and we are all in collaboration on this with CUNY again having that platform of bringing all the entities to the table. So it's something that we are definitely working on under collaboration with a lot of different entities.
Hi, this is Kathryn. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
we can.
I also just wanted to flag that if you look at the permitting guide that the DG Hub put together, we are pretty clear about when the process we outline deviates for some of the other battery chemistries. As Ben was alluding to, there are external review boards that essentially are triggered anytime a technology is new, and those can add time. So while lithium-ion and other chemistries are being permitted, it is likely not to follow as smooth of a path as we outlined in that guide, but that guide does kind of flag what you can at least expect if you're not, say, an advanced lead-acid battery at the moment. So I think it could still potentially be a helpful resource.
Great, thanks. I know that was not an easy question to start things off, so appreciate all the great information there. Talking about batteries, there's a question about non-chemical batteries, so particular thermal batteries or thermal storage. Is this played into the research that has gone on so far? Is thermal storage part of the New York City goal? What are your thoughts on that? I can throw this open to everyone.
So on the DG Hub side, we were certainly focused on battery energy storage. That was our original charge from DOE, and primarily where our research is focused. And then I'll let Ben chime in on the other part.
Yeah, I think the use cases we intend to support are certainly inclusive of thermal energy storage systems. I would say that just the way the initial target was calibrated was more with battery storage systems in mind. But I think we're going to probably be thinking about alternative approaches that can be more inclusive explicitly of thermal energy storage as well, because certainly it offers a lot of the same benefits, particularly at the building scale. And a lot of large buildings in New York City have already moved forward on thermal energy storage systems for a number of years. So we're certainly seeking to be inclusive and not exclusive of thermal systems.
Great. And I know, Ben, you've got to get going. We'll see if we can get one more question in here. Just a question about compensation for batteries. They can provide a lot of different grid services. And as New York City, as CUNY, in the research, have you developed any sort of methodology for quantifying the benefits they can provide for grid services? Is there any system that is currently in place to consider the different financial benefits that storage can provide?
This is Laurie Reilly speaking. We are embarking on a new effort, value of resiliency. As REV is the Reforming the Energy Vision, and the Public Service Commission for the state of New York is coming out with new ways to value solar that that is making changes to net metering, in particular for commercial applications. And in this, they do mention storage. So there's a recognition of storage and the value that, this value stack that people are calling it, that it's been coined, is coming out. And then there's the other side of valuing resiliency, or the other benefits it has for, beyond peak shaving and load shifting. But in the areas of, working with insurance companies, so that if they have a client that has solar plus storage, that there is a recognition by the insurance company and maybe a deduction on their premium because they've made measures to protect their property, for a certain amount of hours if the grid goes down. So there's that whole area that really hasn't been touched yet for insurance company, for banks, for mortgage companies. So these are all areas that we are now working in. So we've got some great partners, and it might take a little while to carve that out, but it's very much in the forefront right now.
I'll just add really quick.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just add to that there are other activities at the state and federal level to better integrate distributed energy resources with a focus on energy storage into wholesale markets. So the New York Independent System Operator has a DER roadmap out and is conducting a pretty extensive stakeholder process to better understand how through its markets for both energy and ancillary services we can better deliver revenue streams and participation opportunities to energy storage. So the city is very supportive of that effort and has provided pretty extensive feedback trying to maximize revenue opportunities where it can for energy storage. And similarly, the FERC has a notice of public rulemaking that has a pretty similar orientation, trying to see how at a federal level they can coordinate among independent system operators and regional transmission organizations to monetize benefits of energy storage. And I think those are really encouraging in terms of just diversifying the types of revenue opportunities that energy storage providers have, regardless of whether there are kind of temporary utility incentives available, such as BQDM.
Great, thanks, Ben. Well, thank you all. Thank you to Laurie, Kathryn, and Ben. It's been really interesting. I know everybody's watching New York State and City very closely to see what develops there on solar and storage. I'm sorry to people that we didn't get to their questions, and we're over time right now. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to throw it back to Sam really quick, who can let you know about some of the things that we have going on, and we'll get a recording out to you folks later on. And please follow up with us with any questions that you do have remaining.
Thanks, Seth, and thank you, everybody. There's some information on your screen right now with how you can contact us for more information, and our web address is on the screen. We have a lot more information and resources there. I also wanted to let everyone know about an upcoming webinar that we have this Thursday. Seth mentioned it at the beginning of this webinar. Thursday's webinar is going to be about presenting some of the tools that we have that can help communities build more resilient facilities in their community with solar plus storage. I'm going to be outlining some of the tools that we offer, some of the resources that we have. That webinar is at 1 o'clock Eastern on Thursday, so we hope you can join us for that. That webinar is free as well. You can read more about that on our website at cleanegroup.org/webinars. There's a list there of all of our upcoming webinars and links to our past webinars. We will send out a recording of this webinar sometime this afternoon. And that's all we have for you today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Bye.